Thank you so much. I do want to begin by thanking Campaign Life and ADF International for the opportunity to present a movement that's taking place in Canada today regarding sex-selective abortion. I hope this evening is an opportunity to be encouraged by my efforts as a Canadian Member of Parliament to bring forward legislation that protects preborn baby girls and reflects the values of most Canadians. The 2021 priority theme of CSW 65 calls for women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence, for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. As you're aware, violence against women is condemned in the 1995 United Nations Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And the violence condemned includes forced sterilization and forced abortion, coercive forced use of contraceptives, female infanticide, and prenatal sex selection. There's a persistent and overlooked form of gender inequality deserving urgent attention and a concerted legislative response. During the past quarter century, UNFPA, UNICEF, and the WHO called for a renewed effort by government and civil society to address the deeply rooted gender discrimination against women and girls, which lies at the heart of sex selection abortion. Another 10 years have passed since that statement. And I believe it's time for all member states, UN Women, and civil society to follow these commitments through for empowerment of all women and girls. We all know words are meaningless, no matter where they originate, if they are simply words and no more. While it's common and very important to point to large troubling sex ratios of birth in India and China, as well as cultures where the boy child is deemed more essential than the girl child, let us not discount the impact of this practice in OECD member states, such as my country, Canada, where male to female sex ratios are as high as 1.96 and have been recorded. The absence of any law to protect the girl child states that sex-selective abortion is permissible in my country. In Canada, we have no laws against abortion, none. We are the only democratic country that has no laws, and the only other country that also fails in any way to protect preborn children is North Korea. On February 26, 2020, as Matea mentioned, I introduced the Sex Selective Abortion Act, Bill C-233, in the House of Commons. This enactment amends the criminal code to make it an offense for a medical practitioner to perform an abortion knowing that the abortion is solely sought on the grounds of the child's genetic sex. It also requires the Minister of Health, in consultation with representatives of the provincial governments who are responsible for health, to come together to establish guidelines respecting information provided by a medical practitioner in relation to a request for an abortion. Sex-selective abortion happens in Canada. It's not permissible in a society that advocates for equality of the sexes. Adopting appropriate legislation to end discrimination against any person based on sex is part of Canada's commitment to advancing human rights. Well, my bill addresses inequality between the sexes at the earliest stages of life. Canada is a country that values equality of the sexes, and sex-selective abortion inherently denies the equal value that we claim that we support. If a baby girl is unwanted simply because she's a girl, I am pleased to say that most Canadians now believe that this has gone too far. I'm pleased to say that there's a new reality rising in Canada. A very recent national poll found that a majority of Canadians would be more likely to support a political party if that party promised to legally restrict sex-selective abortion in Canada. Among the results, 52% of Canadians overall, 56% of those with a postgraduate degree, 58% of those who voted Conservative in 2019, 51% of those who voted Liberal and 61% of those who voted for the Bloc would be moderately to much more likely to vote for a party that promised to restrict sex-selective abortion. This critical mass is reason enough for political parties to do what Canadians are demanding them to do, to legally restrict sex-selective abortions in Canada. Evidently, there is unity across this country for Canada to assert itself on this fundamental human rights issue. This poll I just mentioned comes less than a year after the results of a 2019 Dart and Maru Blue poll conducted for the National Post, which found that 84% of Canadians believe it should be illegal to have an abortion if the family does not want the baby to be a certain sex. I've been so honored and humbled by the support I've received from thousands of Canadians opposed to sex-selective abortion. These 2019 poll results only reinforce that Canadians are united on the need to set reasonable boundaries on abortion that reflect Canada's values at home and on the world stage. Petitions in support of this majority view to criminalize sex-selective abortions in Canada were presented in the House of Commons, and they state, whereas sex selection abortion is legal, as Canada has no legal restrictions on abortion, sex-selective abortion is antithetical to our commitment to equality between men and women. And a 2019 Dart and Maru Blue poll conducted for the National Post showed that 84% of Canadians believe it should be illegal to have an abortion if the family does not want the child to be a certain sex. International organizations, including the World Health Organization, United Nations Women, and United Nations Children Fund, have identified unequal sex ratios at birth as a growing problem internationally. Canada's healthcare profession recognizes sex selection as a problem. So, therefore, we, the undersigned citizens of Canada that call upon the House of Commons to pass a criminal code at prohibition of sex selection abortion, are calling on this government to do this now. So, to thousands of signatures presented in the House of Commons, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the Honourable David Lametti, responded. And this is what he said. The Government of Canada condemns all practices that are motivated by discriminatory views of women and girls, including sex-selective practices. In Canada, he says, the administration and funding of healthcare services is a provincial responsibility that falls under the purview of the provincial governments. As is the case for other medical procedures, the delivery of abortion services is determined by the policies of the provincial governments and the standards set by the medical profession itself, end quote. Well, although the minister is correct about the provincial responsibility for procedural policies, in regards to abortion, our federal government has already created a precedent in law in regards to sex selection. Specifically, sex selection is already illegal in the case of embryos under the Assisted Human Reproduction Act 2004, Section 5E1E. In order to expand this protection to all preborn children, a criminal prohibition must be added to the criminal code. As well, in response to medical associations, the Canadian Medical Association itself has indicated that sex-selective abortions are a problem in Canada, following 2 studies peer-reviewed and published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in 2016. Canada's health care profession has shown concern about sex-selective abortion and discourages the practice. In 2007, the executive of the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, the SOGC, issued a statement that medical technologies for the sole purpose of gender identification in pregnancy should not be used to accommodate societal preferences, and that the SOG does not support termination of pregnancy on the basis of gender. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario and the Colleges of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia also echo the SOGC's view. Clearly, with these views, coupled with the views of the majority of Canadians, it is past time to bring the Sex Selection Abortion Act into law. In its statement, the Vedic Hindu Cultural Society declared that C-233 is a reasonable limit on abortion that would work to enhance Canada's human rights image, and they're situated in British Columbia. The United Sikhs is a UN-affiliated international nonprofit, non-governmental, humanitarian relief, human development, and advocacy organization aimed at empowering those in need, especially disadvantaged and minority communities across the world. The letter of endorsement, signed by Sukhwinder Singh, the Canadian National Director of United Sikhs, notes that, and I quote, C233 proposes a reasonable limit that would reflect Canada's respect for human rights at all stages of life. The practice of sex-selective abortion takes place in Canada, and it's our duty to defend those lives, those whose lives would be ended simply because of their sex, end quote. The majority of Canadians have indicated that our criminal code must reflect the values of Canadians, and their government must act now to condemn this practice and to make it clear to all that Canada values women and equality. If there's even one female preborn child who is terminated because of her sex, we need to act. Those I speak to, including a recent group of college students attending a women's studies class, are in disbelief that a country like Canada would permit this type of abortion. In the Post-Millennial, a March 7th, 2020 article states that sex-selective abortion is a cause that unites us in Canada. While some oppose abortion and some promote it, we should all be able to stand side by side against sex-selective abortion, as we all have an interest in standing against gender inequality. There is a realization that if a baby girl is unwanted simply because she's a girl, abortion on demand has gone too far, and we must respond. As a Canadian Member of Parliament seeking to respond to these concerns for the vast majority of our population, I encourage others to seek to end this travesty in the countries that you call home. I encourage the Commission on the Status of Women to actively work to eliminate the most egregious forms of gender-based discrimination that are facing our world today. And I also want to encourage other legislators to make ending sex-selective abortion your highest priority for the sake of the girl, child, and women. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. I would like to begin by thanking all of you in advance at this parallel event and everyone who is interested and engaged and involved in protecting the rights of women and girls from discriminatory practices across the globe. It is such important work, and I cannot overstate how thankful I am for all of you. This sincere gratitude includes anyone attending who may not initially feel aligned with the desire to end sex-selective abortions. I am not thankful exclusively to those who have a shared ideology. I am thanking anyone with a passion for and commitment to protecting human rights and the rights of women and girls. So thank you truly to everyone in attendance today. Our panel is addressing gender-based violence against girls in the form of sex-selective abortion, a problem that exists due to son preference. We have been conditioned to believe that whenever someone uses the term abortion, we must instantly be polarized and triggered. I will spend the next 15 to 20 minutes outlining why that's not the case. Everyone who cares about women has far more in common than what any differences may suggest. Furthermore, when we begin from our common ground and proceed with honesty and bravery, we are in a position to make real change in eliminating gender-based violence and protecting the rights of women and girls from discriminatory practices. Over the course of this discussion, I will begin by outlining foundational principles that we all agree on. The second part of my presentation will explain why it is so critical that we are honest and consistent in our protection of the rights of girls. We will examine how, if we allow any room for some discrimination against some girls, we undermine all of our efforts to eliminate gender-based violence. This is particularly evident when we are discussing sex-selective abortion. With that introduction, let's begin with what we agree on. Number one, we agree with human rights and gender equality. The UN Declaration of Human Rights states, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Article 2 of that same document states that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. And Article 3 states simply that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of person. Secondly, we agree that gender-based violence exists, must be combated and ended. The UNHCR defines gender-based violence as including sexual, physical, mental, and economic harm inflicted in public or in private. It also includes threats of violence, coercion, and manipulation. This can take many forms, such as intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child marriage, female genital mutilation, and so-called honor crimes. The consequences of gender-based violence are devastating and can have lifelong repercussions for survivors. It can even, some definitions include be carbon-based. Regardless, once a human egg and a human sperm join, there is the creation of a new human organism with a node capable of every requirement to be classified as alive. For the purposes of today, also the term abortion. The following definition, taken from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, states that abortion is the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. We agree that before anything can die, it must first